Today we're going to read a book called In the Garden with Dr. Carver. So this is Dr. Carver, and he is a gardener or a farmer, and we're going to learn more about him. Book is written by Susan Grisby, pictures by Nicole Tadgel. I'll never forget the Sunday that we stepped out of church and saw an old mule waiting beside a funny-looking wagon. A mule is kind of like a donkey. The man with the wagon was George Washington Carver, the famous plant scientist from the big school in Tuskegee. Can you see him? Dr. Carver called the wagon his movable school, and it was piled high with plants, tools, and seeds. I wonder what he's going to do with all those things. The adults gathered all around, eager for gardening advice. They had heard about 20-pound cabbages and onions as big as your head that Dr. Carver had grown on land just like ours. He said the plants get from the soil the foods that they need to make them grow. But cotton, which had been growing in Alabama, ate up all the good food in the soil. Dr. Carver was teaching the people how to make the soil healthy again. He was even teaching people how to turn foods like peanuts and sweet potatoes into yummy things like coffee, butter, and sugar. Hundreds of new foods came from his science laboratory, all from plants that we could grow. So here's sweet potatoes. There's coffee. This looks like sugar. This is starch. But for me, the best part of Dr. Carver's visit was that he agreed to help us with our school garden. Who here wants to be a plant doctor? I waved my hand the hardest, so he asked me to observe the first case. So, Dr. Sally, he said, what do you think is wrong with this rose bush? When all these are covered in flowers, why does this one only have one? I don't know, Sally said. What should I do first? Listen to the plants and they'll tell you, he said. I thought about what he meant. Maybe it was like listening to the wind and watching the sky to tell the weather. I looked over at the healthy roses in the sunshine, and I looked at the sick rose. I got it, I said. The plant needs to move where she can get more sun. Excellent observation, Dr. Sally, Dr. Carver said. Let's begin the operation. He showed us how to transplant the rose bushes very carefully so not to damage her roots or scratch with the thorns. When I was a boy, said Dr. Carver, drawing plants and birds were my favorite things. I used paints and covered stones and boards with pictures of the flowers, and I was always asking questions. I wanted to know the name of every single stone and flower, every insect, bird, and beast that visited the garden. Well, we all wanted to know about the garden too, so we sat there watching and listening, drawing bugs and flowers and worms and birds and mushrooms. I never knew the garden was such a busy place. And Dr. Carver knew the names of everything. Well, that would be a fun thing to come do in our garden too. My brother Ben found a web stretched out like a fishing net. On it was a huge, hungry spider. Ben raised a stick ready to kill it, and Dr. Carver said, actually, that spider is helping your garden. He's eating up the creatures that want to eat your plants. Before you destroy something, you need to know why it's there. The plants, the soil, and the animals are all connected, just like the spider's web is connected. Every single flower bed, dandelions held up their sunny heads. Who planted all of these? Lucy said. Well, that would be the wind, said Dr. Carver. He showed us how the dandelion puff was really tons of seeds carried by the wind. A plant is a weed if it's growing where we don't want it to grow, we learned. The dandelions were taking the food, the light, and the water from the flowers that we planted. Dr. Carver showed us how to weed out the dandelions, pulling them by their long roots. We saved the leaves for lunchtime salad. Dr. Carver said we should eat everything we can, even the weeds. In the Hoover Garden, we have dandelions, and if you come, I'll show you how to eat them. By then, we were as hungry as the dandelions. Our teacher and the older students cooked us delicious picnic food, all from recipes from Dr. Carver. We ate everything: sweet potato flour bread, chicken made from peanuts, and some weeds. And for dessert, peanut ice cream and cake. After the feast, Dr. Carver said it's time to plant our own garden. We found a spot behind the school. "This spot's no good," Emmett said. "It's sunny, but the soil is hard. It won't move." "He's right," Sally said. "Nothing grows out here, even the weeds." Dr. Carver said we need to give food back into the soil so things can grow. He took us to a patch of forest near our school. We scooped up buckets of rich and leafy loam. That's the soil that's yummy for the plants. While we worked, he explained how rotting plants were full of good things to feed the healthy plants. Leaf mulch, swamp muck, and roots of peanuts, peas, and beans will all make the soil better. You can make your own fertilizer by composting paper, vegetables, and anything that breaks down quickly to put nutrients back in the soil. We cleaned the plot of stones, chopped it, raked it, turned the soil, and filled it with the forest humus that we gathered. We worked the soil until we had a rich field. Then we made plots and planted sweet potatoes, peanuts, peas, beans, squash, okra, and melons. Dr. Carver asked us to show him to the nearby dump. We found wood scraps. That's like where all the garbage goes. We found wood scraps and a mop to make a tall scarecrow. Dr. Carver told us he'd made test tubes, lamps, and all sorts of tools from reused treasures that somebody threw away. The word treasure set the kids' eyes on fire. He kept picking until he found a costume for the scarecrow. Back at school, we used milk paint to label our garden signs so that we'd remember what we planted and where. We were all sad to see Dr. Carver leave, but he made the teacher promise to take us outdoors every day to study nature and gardening and gave her guides to use. As we promised Dr. Carver that we wouldn't eat the weeds, as some can be poisonous, until our teacher told us which ones were safe. Some people come in and out of your life just as quickly as a hummingbird, darting at a trumpet vine, and some of them, when they leave behind something that sticks in your heart and your mind. It wraps around you like the tendrils of a vine. Since that day we spent in the garden with Dr. Carver, wherever I step, where there's flowers, trees, or vegetables, I remember his words. Listen to the plants and they'll tell you what they need. They always do. The end. So that's In the Garden with Dr. Carver, and we learned that Dr. Carver was a plant scientist who taught kids how to grow things, how to put nutrients back into the soil so that it was healthy again for new plants.